This tutorial will cover one of the many ways you can create removable ram horns in a sculpture. My name is Christiana, and this video was made for my fantastic Patreon supporters. The first step is to establish the angle of the connection to your piece. I have a styrofoam head here at my base, but really anything you can carve a crater into will do. Here, I visualize how big I want my horns to be. It's also important to know how the material will be supported by the connection. The farther away the horn hangs from the head, the more wooden dowel you will need. There will be spots when I list the materials. They don't last long, so feel free to stop and pause to read the lists completely. So this is all prepping for the correct angle of the base of the horn, where it connects to the head. This part can take quite a while and has a lot of mistakes. Step 2 is getting to the basic structure and shape of the horn. This is where I ended up after much experimentation. Here is a time lapse of how I arrived to this basic shape. One of the methods I used was cutting out paper rings to push the sculpting wire through them, and then space them properly. The important thing to remember is to make sure the base of your horn stays strong and can handle some weight. Here I'm hot gluing some wooden blocks I call keys. We will build around these, but first, epoxy clay. Fill your crater with epoxy clay and make sure to wet the dowel so it doesn't stick to the clay. Find your angle and push it in. This might take a few tries. Don't leave it in or the epoxy clay will bind to the wood. Keep wetting the dowel and the keys. Once the epoxy dries, it will become super strong and you will have the start of a beautiful connection. Step 3 is foil shaping. This gets its own section because it's key in understanding the final shape of your horns. And it takes lots and lots of foil. You still want it to be lightweight, but this is where you can really see how much space your horns will take up. Smoothing time! So in the design of my horns, the inside of the ram horn is flat. We need to establish these basic visual structures in the foil. Cover the foil with a nice thick layer of paper mache. This will give the clay something to cling to so it doesn't slide around on the foil, and it adds more structural strength to your piece. It might be tempting to do the entire horn at once, but do the base half first. Paper mache can get heavy when wet, and covering the entire horn will distort all the work you put into the foil. It's a rather sticky process. Wait for the base half to dry before applying the paper mache to the rest of the horns. It's important for the longevity of your piece to let it dry between steps. The last thing you want is moisture trapped in a pocket where mold can grow. So be patient and let it rest. This took about 3 days in a warm California climate to dry completely. Time to fuss over that connection point. With epoxy clay in hand, we sculpt the base of the horn over the keys and smooth over the connection point. To keep the horn from sticking to the rest of the sculpture, lay down some saran wrap. Build the epoxy clay to give the horn as much support as possible so there are no gaps between where it connects to the head and the rest of the horn. This will require several applications. Smooth it out best you can, then let it dry. And yeah, with a pair of horns, we do everything twice. We are finally ready to sculpt the horns. After all this prep work, this is the most exciting part for me. I like working with paper clay because once it dries, it's lightweight and strong with low shrinkage. Here I'm getting an even, full coat of clay layered onto the paper mache. This will be the base clay layer I build everything else onto. These horns are large, so they take quite a bit of clay. In this case, I used an entire pack only on one horn, and then had to order more just for this step. Here, I'm working on basic forms again, following along the shapes I established in the foil. These horns have ridges on the side, so building those edges up in the beginning is key. I've got my base layer, my basic forms, and now it's time to get lost in the texture. This part I usually share on my social feeds because it's easy to see progress and doesn't require preamble. This is visually the most interesting part and the work that people can see the easiest. That being said, it is many, many hours of methodical and meditative work. I like to apply texture as I go, because once the clay dries, I need to rehydrate it to get it pliant again. When you build, the trick is to apply wet on wet. I keep clay workable overnight with a wet paper towel and saran wrap, but I don't do it too often or the clay could mold. It is best to work in small batches and finish what I can as I go. For those of you who have asked how long one of these takes, it really is a privilege to work on a commission where I've been given so much creative freedom. And this particular piece took over a year. In fact, all the commissions I'm working on right now are taking over a year because so much happened in 2020 that there were weeks where I couldn't work on it, or I was too emotionally wrung out to create, or I could only work on it 20 minutes at a time. And as always, do everything twice. And there we have our textured horns. Now we let them dry for a few days. Painting is so exciting, but as always, prep. So I lay on the gesso, an excellent paint primer. My sculpture took 3 full coats of this stuff, with drying between each application. And now for the color. As with everything I do, I build slowly over time. I start with a vibrant undercoat, so when I paint the dark on top, there's a luminous aspect to my colors. I watered down my own acrylic paints, which can clog the gun, but it's just part of the process. I really enjoy acrylics for my sculptures. Here I paint darker and darker, layering only more saturated colors. Specifically in my muertitas, even though I have been working with their vibe this whole time, the paint really brings out their personalities. Dry brushing is a great technique to highlight ridges and really brings out sculpted textures. You use very little water and delicately apply the paint just to the tops of the textured parts of your piece. Once the horns are finished, let them dry and seal them to protect the paint from fading and chipping. I use a non-yellowing matte UV spray and I put on several coats. I didn't get video of it because it's toxic when wet, and I like to do it on breezy days with a mask and as fast as possible. I color-coded the base of the horn to match which side it attaches to. You can see the keys as well. And I can carefully slide it into place. Each piece requires its own solutions, its own process. There is no one way or right way to make something. I hope you enjoyed this. Thank you for being here, and be well.